found on the side of the road outside of a small mental institution in Pennsylvania. It appeared to have been thrown from one of the second-story windows. I found no other website more fitting to post what I've read. Believe what you will. I've always been a fan of the strange and the mysterious, especially in the world of video games. I used to be obsessed with reading video game rumors, like the Triforce in the Ocarina of Time or catching Mew in Pokemon Red and Blue. I even started playing Pokemon hacks due to their odd and amusing qualities. The following is my first-hand account on a game that I encountered titled Pokemon Fuchsia for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. I'm writing this purely to describe the game to the reader. My purpose is simple. I'm calling out to anyone who knows anything about this game, or anyone who actually, in fact, has the game in their possession, as I no longer do. I cannot stress enough how important it is for you, the reader, to tell me anything that you might know about Pokemon Fuchsia, so I can find it and destroy it. The next few paragraphs or so, I'm not sure how long it will take me to explain, should inform you as to why my request is so adamant. My account starts as early as this year. March 3rd, 2013 to be precise. I remember the date because it was just one day prior to my 22nd birthday. Little did I know, my birthday would not be enjoyed, even in the slightest. I would spend it confined, within my bedroom, but trapped, figuratively speaking, in a video game. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's just a little hard to write this while the thoughts of what I'm attempting to put in plain words still haunt me, as they do every day. I was spending the day with my friend Anne. We had been best friends since we were little, but as of right now, we have not spoken since our awful experience with the game. We probably won't speak ever again. Anyhow, we were at the local mall, and to my apprehension, she was looking for something to get me for my birthday. Though I had tried to persuade her to keep her money, she was unbendable on the matter. If only I had tried harder. We came across a small pawn shop near the food court that specialized in old video games. Now, I tried to hide my delight when we were walking into the shop, but Anne had already noticed the look in my eye. "Oh, come on," she said, knowing this is where she would find my gift. "All right, Anne, but I probably won't find anything that I'll like." I was lying through my teeth, for her wallet's sake. We strolled over to the glass case in the shop containing nothing but old Game Boy games. I saw some of my favorites, Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal, and... Huh? I noticed a Game Boy Advance cartridge that had a purplish tint to it, with a faint hint of red. I'd never seen that Pokemon game, I uttered to Anne. She could tell I was bewildered, and she had the man behind the counter open the case. We took a closer look at the cartridge. I read it aloud. Pokemon Fuchsia version. What the hell? There wasn't even a Pokemon on the front like a normal Pokemon game should have been, just a swirl of purples and reds. Anne noticed that I was intrigued, and without a moment's notice, she swiped the game out of my hand and went up to the counter to pay for it. I normally would have stopped her from spending her money, but I really wanted to play that game. It was clearly a hacked cartridge, but I knew I would enjoy it whether it was a decent hack, or it was so bad that it made me chuckle. Either way, I had to have it. After thanking Anne for my gift, and parting ways with her, I drove home excited to play Pokemon Fuchsia. I couldn't help but stare at the cartridge sitting there in the passenger seat. The swirl of colors was almost mesmerizing. Before I knew it, I could hear the loud sounds of swerving vehicles and car horns. I looked up to notice that I was driving on the wrong side of the road. I quickly adjusted my car and kept driving. I looked at my surroundings and noticed that I was almost home. What? That should have taken me at least half an hour. I looked back at the clock and noticed that almost a half an hour had passed since I had left the mall. How long had I been staring at that game? I shrugged off the event, knowing that dwelling on it would only make me feel paranoid. I arrived home a few minutes later. I threw my keys on the table and headed to my room. I grabbed my old Game Boy that I'd had since I was 12. I positioned Pokemon Fuchsia into the back and powered it up. I couldn't help but feel a little excited, but also anxious at the same time, remembering what happened in the car. I thought that it somehow had something to do with the game. See what I mean about feeling paranoid? Anyway, the screen loaded up to the Game Freak logo. Frozen. No star animation, no sound, nothing. I sat there for a minute and the game finally brought me to the new game option. I clicked on it and eagerly awaited to see just what Pokemon Fuchsia was. It brought me to a normal beginning with Oak explaining the world of Pokemon. Only instead of Oak, it was Koga, Fuchsia's city gym leader. Oh, I see, I exclaimed to myself. I couldn't believe that it had taken me this long to realize why it was called Pokemon Fuchsia. It was obviously a hack focusing on Fuchsia City. This may in fact be interesting. If I'd only known how interesting it would turn out to be. Koga explained the world of Pokemon, almost word for word like it's explained by Professor Oak in Pokemon Red and Blue. I say almost because at the end of his lecture, he says the following. Remember though, you can't always hide from the bad things in this world. You have to learn to fight your way out. Pokemon are meant to wage war in our honor, and for the sake of keeping us out of harm's way. This is their purpose. This is why they were made. I found this a little odd, to say the least, especially the words, this is why they were made. Made? What did he mean by that? Keeping his words in mind, I continued. I named my character like normal, and chose my gender. I was then placed inside my room, also like normal. I went downstairs and saw what I assumed was my mom. My assumption turned out to be false when I pressed the A button to talk to her. The text box read, Janine. Hi, sweetie. Are you ready for your big day? You do remember what today is, right? I was offered a choice of yes and no, so I clicked no. Janine, today's your big showdown with my dad, silly, remember? Just because he doesn't approve of our relationship doesn't mean that you have to be worried. He's strong, but you can take him. I believe in you. That's right. Janine is Koga's daughter. I seem to be dating her in this game. So far, I was liking this hack, but why did I have to battle Koga this early in the game? And with what Pokemon? I hit start and looked to see if I had any Pokemon, and luckily I did. A level 40 Nidoking and a level 40 Nidoqueen. This was odd to start the game off with, but I was happy with the lineup. I went outside, and unsurprisingly, I found myself in Fuchsia City. I wandered around and found that it looked exactly the same as the Fuchsia City I remembered as a kid, except for the fact that my house from Pallet Town was also there. I talked to the townsfolk, only to be greeted with distaste. They all said hateful things to me. Like, Koga is going to put you in your place. Or, I hope Koga teaches you a lesson. Clearly, Koga had the entire town against me. I could only guess that he really didn't like me dating his daughter. So far, the hack had aroused my curiosity, but it was quite peculiar, to say the least. I finally made my way to the gym and went inside. The gym was no more than a small room, devoid of anything material or living. Anything, that is, except for who I could only assume was Koga, standing at the tip of the room. I walked over and hit A to engage in battle, but to no avail. Koga said, I have no interest in battling you until you know the truth about Pokemon. Go to the Safari Zone library and learn before you fight. Safari Zone library? Strange. I left the gym and went to the Safari Zone. Inside, there were 2 doors, and in between them was a sign that read, Safari Zone left, Safari Zone library right. I walked over to the right and into the library like Koga had instructed. I must say, I was intrigued. The room looked like a Pokemart, only larger. The aisles were composed of books instead of Poke products. There was a book in the corner of the room where the cashier normally would have been. With every room, there was more shelves, more books, and more doors. It was endless. Every time I would try to read a book from one of the shelves, a text box would pop up saying, you can't read these. With every room, every shelf, every book, and every text box, I became more and more motivated to press on and figure out just what was going on. Eventually, I came to a final room. There were no aisles and no books. There was just a man in the center of the room. He looked like one of those random sprites from Oak's lab. I went over to him and pressed the A button. He simply said, come with me. Come with him where? There were no doors left. Where were we going? The screen faded to black and the 2 of us appeared in another doorless room with not even an exit. There was machinery and computers all around. It was reminiscent of Bill's house in Cerulean City, but more detailed. I could see how the person responsible for this hack cartridge created the game, and I applauded him for his work. At least at this point I did. It was enjoyable at the time, and left me wanting more. Always theorizing what would come next, because at this point, Pokemon Fuchsia didn't make much sense. Much like reading the beginning of a good mystery novel. If only I had left it a mystery. The lab sprite fiddled around on the largest computer in the room, and then walked over to me. He said, "This is where Pokemon are created." I was nothing short of shocked when I read the statement, and I became even more interested in Pokemon Fuchsia. It had the potential to be even better than a normal Pokemon game. The lab sprite continued on, although it wasn't always this way. This town is Koga's passion, and he would stop at nothing to keep it from any sort of demise. Years ago, when the Safari Zone was at its peak of popularity, it soon became apparent that it would, well, run out of Pokemon. Koga could not have this. It was the only thing bringing people to Fuchsia City, a place that he himself founded to start a life with his daughter after her mother passed away. I think the creator of this game was laying on Koga's backstory a little thick, but I read on. Working with Professor Oak and myself, Koga spent 2 long years trying to create Pokemon, and just as the Safari Zone was going under, he succeeded. The detail that this game was going into just at the beginning was impressive. He continued, "Have you ever noticed that the Pokemon in the Safari Zone can't be caught anywhere else? That's because they aren't anywhere else. These Pokemon were created here. The first one we created was Scyther, followed by Tauros, and the list goes on. However, Koga soon became obsessed with the idea of creating Pokemon for his own personal agenda, becoming the most powerful trainer there ever was." Okay, so this is as much as I could remember word for word. I have a photographic memory, but this game went into too much detail. The next million paragraphs explained that Professor Oak originally created all the Pokemon, and this is why it only took 2 years for him, the lab guy, and Koga to do so again. Koga became abnormally power-hungry and forced Oak to recreate every Pokemon, only more powerful. He did so after years and years of hard, relentless work, but the problem with creating such strong Pokemon is that they become too power-hungry. These Pokemon were killers, and ended up killing the original Pokemon population within a year. Very few trainers could control such malicious creatures, and that's why Koga and my character are the only trainers left. In a sense, though, the game never put it into words. Koga ruled the Pokemon world. I think Fuchsia City was the only town left, and everyone there is too scared to cross him. When he hates something, they hate the same thing, such as me. Despite the absurdly long dialogue, I was developing quite the fascination with this odd but engaging storyline. The creator chose an oddball town and gym leader as the focus for his narrative. This made the story refreshingly original. Koga started with a commendable motive for his actions, but quickly lost his way and began creating Pokemon to fight for him, making him the most feared individual in the Pokemon world. If you will, it was also vaguely believable, considering the hard-headed nature of Koga in the original Pokemon games. I liked it. Later on, I learned to hate it. What I perceived to be the next morning, I woke to the sound of a loud knocking on my apartment door. I didn't even remember going to bed. I jumped up and ran to see who it was. I opened the door and there was Anne, looking very upset but relieved when she saw me. "There you are! What the hell? You haven't answered your texts or calls in over 2 weeks!" I looked at her for a moment with a touch of anger in my eyes and remembered her. "What are you talking about? We were hanging out yesterday at the mall." Anne looked astonished. "That was more than 2 weeks ago. What's going on? Are you on drugs?" Anne didn't seem to be joking, even in the slightest. I picked up my cell phone and noticed almost 100 texts and 22 missed calls. I then checked the date. It had indeed been over 2 weeks. I had apparently slept through my birthday, and many days after that. What the fuck? I immediately asked Anne to take me to the doctor. And cutting to the chase, we found nothing wrong with me. Anne brought me home after I nearly had a panic attack, wondering what had happened. And then that was that. I called my job and explained everything. They understood, and I relaxed. And then I remembered the game. Maybe that'll get my mind off things, I thought to myself. I went to my room, grabbed the game, and continued playing. The last thing I remember was the lab guy explaining everything to me in the doorless room. As soon as I started the game up, without so much as a Game Freak logo or New Game Continue screen, it took me to a flashback of what I had done up to this point. Much like Fire Red and Leaf Green, there were multiple cutscenes of my character losing to Koga. I didn't recall fighting him whatsoever. Then again, I didn't remember anything that happened to me over the past 2 weeks. I was very unnerved, but I kept watching to see what else I had done. After what must have been my 10th loss to Koga, it revealed my character walking to a building adjacent to the Safari Zone, walking inside and meeting what looked like Professor Oak. The next scene showed my character stepping into a machine in the corner of Oak's home, like the one in Bill's house in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, and then reappearing outside of a cave in the middle of what looked like a red ocean, or lava, maybe. It displayed my character walking into the cave, fighting with a glitch Pokemon called EXP-1. It looked like missing now and capturing it. The next scene showed me fighting Koga and winning. The last scene depicted my character taking Koga's place in the gym. Everyone in the town was there before me. It then showed an unsettling animation of my character's sprite with a menacing smile on his face. It would appear that my character was the new tyrant in town. I wasn't sure how to feel about this. There was only one way to find out how this had happened. I had to keep playing. I found my character in the gym, right where the cutscenes had left off. I walked outside and immediately noticed that something was off. There was no one around. I tried to walk into some of the houses, but all of the doors were locked. I walked over to my house, and luckily, I was able to get in. I went inside and talked to Janine. All she could say was... ... I wasn't exactly getting to the bottom of anything. I thought about the cutscenes for a second, and then recalled EXP-1. I looked at my party. Nidoking and Nidoqueen were gone, and in their place was the odd Missingno-like Pokemon. It had no stats, no moves, and no levels. Only its name and its glitchy appearance. This was strange. I then remembered the building near the Safari Zone. I ventured to its entrance, and to my satisfaction, it too was unlocked. I walked inside and talked to Oak. This is what he said. What have I done? I should have never sent you to that place. I put that Pokemon there for a reason. Its evil nature has consumed you. It was the first Pokemon I'd ever created, and it was a failed experiment. I should have never created it in the first place. When you asked for a Pokemon that could defeat Koga, it was the only one that I could think of. I thought that maybe if you could defeat him, you could restore this world to its original luster. This is much worse. You are much worse. The thing you caught in that cave, the thing I created so long ago, has changed you. We're all damned. If you have any sense left in you, you will bring that thing back where you caught it. Go! Now! Just then Oak vanished. I immediately walked over to the teleportation machine and went back to the island, almost as if I had felt that evil nature of this Pokemon actually had brought real-world repercussions. My paranoia got the best of me. I traveled back to the cave and walked inside, but nothing happened. I looked at my party, but nothing was there. Fuck. I traveled back to Fuchsia City for my answers. My answer was waiting for me in the gym. I walked in and found nothing visible, that is. Battle music started, and I soon found myself face to face with EXP-1. For the second time, I guess, my heart was pounding out of my chest. Now, you might think me foolish for getting so caught up in a video game, but this story is purely to describe the game to you, the reader. And it is a you-had-to-be-there story at best. You really would have had to play the game to understand my fear. Otherwise, you'd only find this to be an amusing and maybe interesting off-killer horror read. The horror that I'm speaking of came next. The next thing I remember was waking up in my bed, drenched in sweat. I jumped up and urgently checked my phone for the date. This time, it really was the next day. And just as I sighed with relief, I heard knocking on my door. It was Anne. "I brought you some breakfast. How are you feeling?" "Not so great, but better, I guess," I uttered. I explained everything to her and told her that I thought the game was causing me to black out from time to time. She looked at me in disbelief, but she could tell I was spooked. "Jesus, dude. I knew you loved video games, but this is plain pathetic. The game is taking its toll on your mental health. Where is it?" Despite her harsh words, I knew that she was just concerned. I brought the game out to her, and she swiped it up from my hand without a second thought. "I'm taking this for a few days. As for you, do something productive. If I had known you would get so worked up over this thing, I wouldn't have given it to you in the first place. Maybe I'll play it and see what happens. What's got you so stressed out?" My last two words to her were, "But Anne." She left. This would be the last time I spoke with Anne. I sat down and thought to myself, maybe this will be good for me. I mean, that game was freaking me out anyway. I don't need it. Those last 4 words may have been true, but it didn't feel that way. Over the course of the next couple of days, I felt a stronger and stronger urge to continue the game and see what would happen next. It was to the point where I just had to get it back. And no one, not even Anne, could keep that game from me. I called and called, texted and texted, but Anne would not answer me. I finally decided to drive to her house to get the game back. If I failed to depict the following events in a cohesive manner, that's to be expected, as this was one of the worst days of my life. I arrived at her house and knocked on the door. For a solid 15 minutes, I tried opening the door, but it was locked. Her car is in the driveway, so she has to be home, I exclaimed aloud. Now, I'm not a fan of breaking and entering, but I was now worried about my best friend. I used my debit card to slip in through the front door. In retrospect, I should have just called the police. I walked upstairs to her room, and after yelling her name a few times, I walked over to her room and opened the door. There she was, lying unconscious on the floor with a Game Boy in her hand and Pokemon Fuchsia in the back. "Anne!" I ran over to her and shook her almost lifeless body. She wouldn't wake. I looked at the screen on the Game Boy. It was frozen on that same animation, portraying my character with that same menacing smile on his face. I ran downstairs and I called 911 on Anne's house phone. I left my house in such a hurry to get the game back that I forgot to grab my cell phone. An ambulance arrived as well as 2 police cars. Anne was taken away and I was questioned relentlessly about what happened. I never should have told the truth, but I did. So let me get this straight. A video game caused you to black out for 2 weeks and has now put your friend in a coma. The cop interrogating me asked with a grin of distrust on his face. "She's in a coma? You have to believe me. I had nothing to do with this. It was the game. Just play it, and you'll see. It was in her Game Boy." I was scared at this point. "That's just it," the cop said. "There was no Game Boy on the scene. Your story, even if it was remotely believable, is full of holes. Your friend's coma was physically induced by a blow to the head. You admitted to breaking in, and you are the prime suspect in this investigation." I was speechless. I couldn't believe what he was saying. I just couldn't. But wait. My mind wandered. All of a sudden, everything was coming back to me, just like the game. Flashbacks were playing in my head of what really occurred over those weeks. I saw it in a few cutscenes, but I remembered everything. Anne bought me the game. I went home. I played it for 2 weeks, but I was looking at a blank screen the entire time. The cartridge never worked. She came over after the 2 weeks and yelled at me. "You have to stop playing that game. It doesn't even work. I'm worried about you." I fought with her until she left, and I kept looking at the nothing that was on the screen. She came over the following day and pried the game from my hands as I yelled at her. She left in a hurry and didn't come back. I drove to her home 2 days later and broke in. We fought again. This time Anne was looking frightened. She told me that she gave the game away. I became furious and I pushed her. She fell to the floor and didn't get up. By now, I should maybe mention that as a child I suffered from blackouts, delusions of grandeur. I hadn't had an episode in over 15 years. Has there been another one? A more severe one? My mom always thought that I had such an imagination the way that I would play pretend with my Game Boy. Until she became worried. I guess that I would play a game through until the end, and then keep playing without the cartridge in. I would create a new and wild storyline so that I could keep playing even when the game was over. Especially with my Pokemon games. I used to black out, play games that weren't there, and remember later when my psychiatrist would reach a breakthrough. It wouldn't last, and then I would forget again. Even forget that I had the conversation with my psychiatrist in the first place. Given that my blackouts were mainly harmless, my mom stopped seeking help. I can remember all of this now. I blocked it out for so long. How long will this breakthrough last? How long? The next thing I knew, I woke up in a cold bed in what I later found out was a mental hospital. I must have had another blackout. The doctors here say that Anne passed away shortly after being admitted to the hospital. I don't believe them. Koga has them against me. I'll find out what happened to her. Every answer that I need is in that game. It's my message to the reader. Please help me. If you know where this game is, you have to help me. I have to play it. I need to know what actually happened to Anne. I need to know. It has something to do with the game. I just know it. To anyone who finds this, please bring back the game to me. I have to play it. I have to.